This is Mrs. Wainwright's math class, chapters 6, 7, and 8, Packet E, lesson 8, patterns with fractions. Today's learning targets: by the end of the lesson, you should confidently be able to say, I can use addition or subtraction to describe a pattern with fractions, and I can use addition or subtraction to create a sequence with fractions. Let's take a look at example number 1. It says write a rule for the sequence, and then find the unknown terms. So I have a sequence here, 1/4, 7/16. I have 3 blanks, which means there's 3 unknown terms. 1 and 3/16, 1 and 3/8, 1 and 9/16, 1 and 3/4. Boy, this is what seems like it's going to be hard. But it's not, because we're going to break it up step by step. I need to find the rule, and I do know that sometimes they will only give me one line for a rule, but every time there's a pattern, and I need to find the pattern, I know there's actually 2 rules, so I'll always make sure there's 2 blanks for the rule. So in order to solve these patterns and sequences, we're going to break it down into different steps. First step we have is step A, and A stands for adjust. The first thing we need to do, especially if there's fractions, is adjust all of our numbers so that they have common denominators, because you can only truly compare fractions and find the rule if the denominators are common. So we need to adjust. How do I adjust? Well, I look at my denominators, and each time I get to a new denominator that I have not yet seen, I circle it. So the first fraction is 1/4. I have not yet seen a denominator of 4. The next fraction is 7/16. I have not yet seen a denominator of 16. We skip the blanks that we'll need to find out. The next fraction or mixed number is 1 and 3/16. I already circled a 16, so I'll ignore that. The next mixed number is 1 and 3/8. I have not yet seen a denominator of 8, so I'll circle the 8. We move on, we get 1 and 9/16. I already circled a 16, so I'll ignore it. And our last number is 1 and 3/4. I already circled a 4, so I will ignore it. So I'm going to find the LCM, LCD of all of the circled numbers so that I can find a common denominator. So I'll write down LCM, LCD, and I'll do my numbers in order from largest to smallest, because I do know that's fastest. 16, then 8, then 4. So let's go back to my 16 and go through my 16 times tables. Remember, always start with 1, and 16 times 1 equals 16. 8, when I go through my 8 times tables, do I get to 16? 8, 16, yes I do. What about 4? When I go through my 4 times tables, do I get 16? 4, 8, 12, 16, yes I do. So my LCD is 16, and that will be my new common denominator. So now I'll do my setup. I'll go back through my original numbers up top, whether they're fractions or mixed numbers, and anything that does not already have a denominator of 16, I'll do my setup so that I can change it to 16. So the first given number is the fraction 1/4. That does not have a 16, so I'll put it with a window box, equals a fraction bar, and what I know my new denominator will be, which is my common denominator, 16. Next fraction, 7/16, already has a 16. Skip the blanks, 1 and 3/16 already has a 16. 1 and 3/8, oh, that's not 16, so I'll write it down, 1 and 3/8. Put my window box and my equal sign. I'll move my whole number over now so I don't forget it, and make a new fraction bar with my LCD of 16. Okay, go back up to the top. 1 and 9/16 already has a denominator of 16, so I can skip it. 1 and 3/4 does not have a denominator of 16, so I'll write down my 1 and 3/4, my setup of my window box, my equal sign, bring over my whole number, and my new LCD. So now I have to go ahead and solve. I look at the top number, 1/4. What do I do to a 4 to turn it into a 16? Well, 4 times 4 equals 16, and whatever I do on the bottom, I must do on the top. So I'll say times 4. And solve. 1 times 4 is 4. So I'll go back up to my original problem. On that top left side, I'll put a line through 1/4. I don't want to cross it out so much so that I can't see it. I just want to know that it's crossed out and I've changed it. And I'll write my new fraction with the common denominator above it, which is 4/16. Now I'll go back to the brown, 1 and 3/8. So what do I do to an 8 to turn it into 16? 8 times 2 is 16. Whatever I do on the bottom, I must do on the top, so I'll times 2. 3 times 2 equals 6. So I'll go up into my problem and cross up my original 1 3/8, and above it I'll write my new mixed number, which is 1 6/16. Go back to the last problem in the brown, 1 3/4. What do I do to a 4 to turn it into 16? 4 times 4 is 16. Whatever I do on the bottom, I must do on the top. And 3 times 4 equals 12. So I'll go back up, cross up my original mixed number of 1 3/4, and I'll change it to the new mixed number of 1 12/16. So now I have adjusted all of my numbers, and they all have the common denominator of 16. I'm ready to move on to step B. And B stands for both rules. I have 2 rule blanks, so I need to find what goes into both of those rule blanks. Remember, the first one I need to find out, is it a plus or a minus rule? And then I'll need to subtract 2 numbers that are next to each other to find what the number for the rule is. Okay, so first rule, is this a plus or minus rule? Well, I have to look at my numbers and see if they're getting larger. If so, it's a plus rule, or smaller. And if that happens, it's a minus rule. So I have 4/16, then 7/16. Well, right away, I can tell you my numbers are getting larger. Therefore, this is a plus rule. So I write down plus, and I check that part off. Now it says I need to subtract to find the number. Remember, to do that, I take any 2 numbers that are next to each other, and it's always going to be subtract the larger one on top minus the smaller one. I'm going to take these 2 numbers right here since they're next to each other. So 7/16 is larger. I'll do 7/16 minus 4/16. Well, the denominators are already the same, which means they stay the same. And 7 minus 4 equals 3. So the rule will be plus 3/16. And I'll write that right in. Since I've already changed all of the denominators to common denominators, whatever you find your rule to be at this point in time, you'll keep it. You won't simplify. You'll just keep it so the denominator is the same as the rest. Okay, so we finished step B, both rules. We're ready to move on to step C. And step C, the C stands for check the rule. If the rule isn't correct, the answer cannot possibly be correct, so we do need to take the rule and check it with 2 numbers that they gave us to make sure that it works. Remember, we don't want to use the 2 numbers that we used when we found the rule. So I'm going to look at 2 different numbers. So when I found the rule, I used the 4/16 and the 7/16, therefore I will not use those. Let's do 1 3/16 and see if it equals 1 6/16 when I apply my rule. So here we go. I take the first number, which is the 1 3/16, and I apply the rule, which I said it's plus 3/16. Remember, line up your fractions, line up your whole numbers. Nice and easy because I already have common denominators, so my denominator of 16 stays the same. 3 plus 3 equals 6. 1 plus nothing equals 1. So if my rule is correct, my next number should equal 1 6/16. And it does. So I know my rule is correct. I'm ready to move on to the next step. And now we're at step D, and D stands for do solve the problem. So I have the rule, I know it's correct, and now I'm going to solve. So in order to solve, I find the number that comes just in front of the blank, which is 7/16, and I will apply my rule, and I'll keep applying it until I find all of the answers to the blanks. This is going to take a little bit of room, so I'm going to find where I have a nice long column so I can kind of keep going or move to a next page if necessary. But I see some space right over here, so I'm going to say 7/16, which is the last number they gave me. My rule is plus 3/16. Denominators are already common, so it stays 16, and 7 plus 3 equals 10. So I'll put a star next to this because that's my first blank. I have a second blank, so I'll apply the rule again. The rule is plus 3/16. Denominator stays the same as 16. 10 plus 3 is 13. So that's my second blank. I'll put a star next to it. I have a third blank, so I will apply the rule again. The rule was plus 3/16. I'll add it up. My denominator is 16, and 13 plus 3 equals 16. So I'll put a star, and that's the number for my third blank. Now I found what all of the blanks should be. The only problem is I cannot put the numbers in unless they are fully simplified. So I have to go back star by star, find that number, and fully simplify it. So my first star is the 10/16. I'll write down 10/16, and I need to simplify that. I know this has to be simplified because 10 is an even number and 16 is an even number, so this is not fully simplified. So I'm going to find my GCF of both 10 and 16. Factors of 10 are 1 and 10. 2 does work because it's even, and its partner is 5. 3 doesn't work, 4 doesn't work, and I have 5, so I am done. I'm looking for the greatest common factor, so I start with the largest number, 10. When I go through my 10 times tables, do I say 16? No. When I go through my 5 times tables, do I say 16? No. When I go through my 2 times tables, do I say 16? Yes. So my GCF is 2. I will put that into the window box and divide to simplify. 10 divided by 2 equals 5. 16 divided by 2 equals 8. So 10/16 simplifies to 5/8, and I will put that on my first line. Okay, my second star for my second blank is 13/16. So let's write down 13/16. I don't see a 1. They're not in counting order, so I'll need to find the GCF of both 13 and 16. Factors of 13 are 1 and 13. It's odd, so 2 can't work. 3 doesn't work. 4 can't work, it's odd. 5 doesn't work. 6 can't work. 7, 8 doesn't work. 9, 10, 11, 12. That's it. 1 and 13. So, GCF, greatest. Start with the 13. When I go through my 13 times tables, do I say 16? No. That means the GCF is 1. Oh, and when the GCF is 1, my fraction is done. So 13/16 is fully simplified, and that can go in the line. I'll look at my last star, which is 16/16. I'll write that down. Oh, 16/16. I know any number over itself equals 1, so 16/16 equals 1. And that's my fully simplified answer. So now I have all of the numbers that are fully simplified. My original problem asked me to find the rule and find the unknown numbers in the sequence. I've done that, so this is my final answer. Please stop the video and complete worksheet number 1 right now. Let's take a look at example number 2. Example number 2 says write a rule for the sequence, then find the unknown term. I have a sequence here. I see there's only one blank, and I have a rule with one blank. Anytime there's a sequence and I need to find a pattern, remember that I'm going to have 2 rule blanks, so I'll add the extra blank. Let's go ahead, move it to another page, and complete step A. Okay, so we start with step A, and remember A is for adjust. I need to adjust all of my denominators so that they are the same and common denominators. How do I do that? I start at the beginning and look at the denominators, circle at the denominator each time it's the first time I've seen it. First denominator is 8, then the next denominator is 4. I haven't seen a 4 yet, so I'll circle it. Skip the blank, the next denominator is 2. Haven't seen a 2 yet, so I'll circle it. The last denominator is 8, and I already have an 8 circled. So I'm going to find the LCM or LCD of all my circled numbers. That will be my common denominator. Start with the largest first, which is 8, then 4, then 2. Go through my 8 times tables. 8 times 1 is 8. When I go through my 4 times tables, do I say 8? 4, 8, yes I do. When I go through my 2 times tables, do I say 8? 2, 4, 6, 8, yes I do. So my LCD is 8. That will be my new common denominator. I'll do my setup for each fraction or mixed number that does not have the denominator of 8. So the first mixed number I have is 6 7/8. That's good. 5 3/4. Let's write that down. 5 3/4. I'll do a setup, a window box with an equal sign, move over my whole number, give myself my fraction bar and my new common denominator, which is 8. Okay, go back up to the top, 3 1/2. That does not have an 8, so I'll write that down, 3.5. Do my setup with my window box, my equal sign, bring over my whole number, a fraction bar with the new common denominator, that's 8. Go back up to the top, 2 3/8 already has a denominator that's 8, so I don't need to solve that. So let's go back and finish my problems in the window box. What do I do to a 4 to turn it into an 8? 4 times 2 equals 8. Whatever I do on the bottom, I have to do on the top. So I'll say times 2 and solve. 3 times 2 equals 6. So I'll go back up, put a line through my 5 3/4 and change it to my new mixed number, which is 5 6/8. Let's move down to my next window box. What do I do to a 2 to turn it into an 8? 2 times 4 equals 8. Whatever I do on the bottom, I must do on the top. So times 4. Solve. 1 times 4 is 4. Cross out the 3.5 and put in the new mixed number with the common denominator of 8. Okay, so I have adjusted all my fractions. I'm ready to move on to step B. So remember step B, the B stands for both rules. First rule I need to figure out, is it a plus or a minus rule? Next thing I need to do is subtract to find the number part of the rule. So that's step B. When I have mixed numbers, the first thing I do is look at only the whole number and see if that helps me figure out whether it's addition or subtraction rule. If that doesn't work, then I can look at the fractions, but very often in a mixed number, the whole number will tell me. And I look here and I say the whole number is 6, then 5. Oh, those numbers are going down. When the numbers are going down, what type of rule is it? It's a subtraction rule. So I solved the first part of the rule. Now I need to subtract to find the number part of the rule. Remember, to do that, I take any two numbers that are next to each other. I'll take my first two numbers and I'll subtract them. So I have 6 7/8 minus 5 6/8. Remember, line up your whole numbers, line up your fractions. And my denominators are common, so they're 8. 7 minus 6 equals 1. My whole numbers, 6 minus 5 equals 1. Therefore, my rule, the number will be 1 1/8. So when I look at the entire rule, I see that the rule is minus 1 1/8. I'm ready to move on to step C. Remember, step C, the C stands for check the rule. How do I check the rule? I don't use numbers that I've already used. I use different numbers. I take one of them and apply the rule and see if it equals the number after it. So I had already used 6 7/8 and 5 6/8 to find the rule. So I'm going to look at my next number. Here it is, 3 4/8. So I'll write down 3 4/8. I'll apply the rule, which says minus 1 1/8. Of course, lining up my fractions and my whole numbers. And we're going to subtract the fractions. Common denominators are the same, so it stays as 8. 4 minus 1 is 3. Whole numbers, 3 minus 1 is 2. So I got 2 3/8. Is that the next number that I see? Yes, it is. So my rule is correct. I'm ready to move on to step D. So we're up to step D, and the D stands for do solve. Now's the time that we are going to solve our problem. How do we solve the problem? We'd find the number in front of the blank. In this case, it's 5 6/8. We'll write that down and apply the rule. 5 6/8. The rule is minus 1 1/8. Remember, line up my whole numbers and my fractions. Denominators are already common. They stay the same. 6 minus 1 is 5. Whole numbers, 5 minus 1 is 4. Let's put a star next to that. Oh, that's it. There was only one blank, so we now have the number. But remember, you cannot write the number in unless it's fully simplified. So let's look at that fraction portion. Is there a 1? No. Are they in counting order? No. So I'm not sure if they're fully simplified. Therefore, I'm going to rewrite it over here, 4 5/8. I'm going to find the GCF of both 5, my numerator, and 8, my denominator. Factors of 5 are 1 and 5. 2 doesn't work because it's odd. 3 doesn't work. 4 doesn't work. 5 is already there, so I'm done. Is 5 a factor of 8? 5, 10, no, it's not. Is 1 a factor of 8? Oh, yes, it is, but when the GCF is 1, my fraction is done. So 4 5/8 is fully simplified, and it goes onto the answer line. The question asked me to find the unknown term and to find the rule. I've done both, so this is my answer for question number 2. Please stop and complete worksheet number 2 right now. Example number 3 says write the first 4 terms of the sequence and gives you the rule. It says start at 1/4 and add 1 3/8. First 4 terms means I need simply 4 lines for my 4 terms. It tells me what to start at, so that's going to go on my first line. I start at 1/4. Then it tells me what the rule is. And I have 2 parts of this rule here. It tells me that I will add, which is a plus sign, 1 3/8. Let's move to another piece of paper to have some more room. Okay, so it told me to start with 1/4. I put that on my line, and the rule is add 1 3/8. The only problem is they have different denominators, and I cannot add unless my denominators are the same. So I'm going to need to find the LCM, LCD of 4 and 8. Put my largest number first, and I go through its multiples. 8. When I go through my 4, do I say 8? Yes, I do. So the LCD is 8. So I'm going to take that first fraction, 1/4. I'm going to do a setup because I want to make my denominator an 8. That will make it much easier to be able to add my 1 3/8. So 4 times 2 equals 8. Whatever I do in the bottom, I must do on the top. 1 times 2 equals 2. So now I've changed 1/4 into 2/8. I'll write it down right up here. And in order to find the next terms in the sequence or the blanks, I'll just keep applying the rule, which is I will add 1 3/8. Go ahead and add, and we say denominators are the same, so they stay the same. That's 8. 2 plus 3 equals 5, and nothing plus 1 equals 1. So that's the first term in my sequence. I'll put a star by it. I need to find the second blank. So again, I'll apply the rule. I'll add 1 3/8. Denominators are the same. They stay the same. 5 plus 3 equals 8. 1 plus 1 equals 2. At this point, I'll just put a star because that's the second unknown or the second blank. I'll apply the rule again for the third blank, and the rule was add 1 3/8. Denominators are the same, so they stay the same. 8 plus 3 equals 11. 2 plus 1 equals 3, and that's the third and final term. So all of the starred numbers are my terms, but remember I can't write them in unless they're fully simplified. So the first starred number is 1 5/8. I'll write that down. The question is that fully simplified? Well, I don't see a 1, so I'm not sure. 5, 8 are not in counting order, so I'm not sure. So I'm going to need to find the GCF of both 5 and 8 to be sure. 5 my numerator, 8 my denominator. Factors of 5 are 1 and 5. 2 doesn't work, 3 doesn't work, 4 doesn't work, so that's it. When I go through my 5 times tables, do I say 8, 5, 10? No, I don't. Therefore, the GCF is 1. When the GCF is 1, my fraction is done. So 1 5/8 is already simplified. That's the number that goes on this line. The next starred number that I see is 2 8/8. I write it down and I say, oh, 8/8 equals 1. So this is kind of like saying 2 plus 1, and 2 plus 1 equals 3. That's a whole number, nothing to simplify after that. So 3 will be my next blank. Done with that one. Move down to my next star, which I see is 3 11/8. I'll write it down. Ooh, that is an improper fraction. That is not going to work in a chicken fight. Boom, drop it down into the division box pool. Since there's a whole number before I divide, I will take a bright color and write it down so I don't forget about it. Go ahead and divide. 8 goes into 11 one time. 1 times 8 equals 8. 11 minus 8 equals 3. So this will be 1 3/8. Add it to my original whole number, which was 3. I get 4 3/8. 3/8 is a proper fraction. Doesn't have a 1, and it's not in counting order, so I'm not sure if it's fully simplified. Therefore, I'll find the GCF of both 3 and 8 to be sure. Factors of 3 are 1 and 3. 2 doesn't work, so I'm done. Is 3 a factor of 8? 3, 6, 9, no it's not. The GCF is 1, and when the GCF is 1, my fraction is done. So 4 3/8 is good the way it is. So the directions asked me to find the first four terms of the sequence, and I did. There they are: 1/4, 1 5/8, 3, and 4 3/8. That's my final answer. Please stop the video and complete worksheet number 3 right now. So let's review. When you're asked to find a rule and find the unknown terms, remember, first thing, the rule has two parts, and then we're going to go through our steps A, B, C, and D. Step A stands for adjust. You need to adjust all of your denominators so that they're common denominators. So you find one of each different type, find the LCM, LCD. That's going to be your new common denominator. Adjust everything and rewrite all of your numbers so that they have the same common denominator. Step B, B stands for both rules. First, you need to find whether it's an addition or subtraction rule. To do that, look at your numbers and see if they're getting larger or smaller. Larger means addition, smaller means subtraction. And then the next part is take any two numbers that are next to each other, subtract the largest on the top minus the smallest, and whatever number you get should be the number portion of your rule. Step C, C stands for check the rule. Take a different set of two numbers that are next to each other that you did not use to find the rule. Take the first one, apply the rule, and see if your answer is equal to the second one. If so, the rule is correct. And finally, step D, do solve the problem. Take the number that's just before the blank, apply the rule, keep applying the rule. As you find what should be in the blank, put a star next to it, because remember, you cannot transfer that number over until it's fully simplified. Sometimes to fully simplify, as over here, you'll need to divide by the GCF. Sometimes to fully simplify, it will already be simplified because the GCF will be 1. Sometimes to fully simplify, you'll just have to change that fraction into your whole number, like in this case 1. And sometimes to fully simplify, you'll have an improper fraction that will need to drop into the division box, then be reduced and fully simplified. Some pattern problems are set up differently, and they give you the rule, they give you the number to start with, and they ask you to find a certain number of terms. However many terms they say, that's how many blanks you'll do. Whatever it starts with goes in your first blank. You'll simply need to apply the rule. But remember, when working with fractions, you cannot apply the rule until you have common denominators. And here the rule said add 1 3/8, but the starting fraction they gave us was 1/4. So first we needed to use the LCD, find the common denominator, and change that 1/4 into a fraction with that denominator of 8. Once we did that, we were able to apply the rule. And again, don't forget, as you star them, you then need to fully simplify before you can put the final answers on the line. Fully simplify means you divide by the GCF if necessary. You might need to change a fraction into a whole number, or you might need to drop it into the division box to fully simplify. But final answers on the lines must be fully simplified. These problems take a while, but if you do take it one step at a time and go through it step by step, you do know how to solve every single one of these steps. So it's just a matter of slowing yourself down and doing one step at a time. Hopefully by now you can confidently say, I can use addition or subtraction to describe a pattern with fractions, and yet I can use addition or subtraction to create a sequence with fractions. As always, we'll practice in class. If you have any questions or concerns, please see a teacher. We will help you with it. Good luck with this lesson.